Today on the show, we're going to talk about Jessica Drew, the first Spider-Woman. If you didn't know that she was one of the many characters to have her origin changed, then this show is for you. Jessica Drew. She would first appear in Marvel Spotlight number 32, and she would have a 50-issue comic book series that would follow quickly after. And what I find funny is that her creation actually came about because of paranoia and not because of a want to create the character. Basically, Marvel wanted to keep the name Spider-Woman, but they realized to actually keep the name Spider-Woman, they'd have to use it. And they didn't really want a repeat of the Wonder Man, Wonder Woman situation. Put bluntly, they were scared that if they waited too long, DC or another company would come along and snatch up the name Spider-Woman. Now, as all comic book series that are done out of a business tactic rather than love, it didn't exactly go smoothly. You see, the series had an almost consistent turnover of writers, and one group of writers actually stripped away everything that was special about the character. By the time the 50th issue was close, it just made sense to end the series, and they wanted to do something to give the finale some life, so they hired novice writers and artists to give a new perspective on the Marvel Universe for this character. This group of writers and artists did something that's not exactly common in the comic book world. They had the character die in her last issue number 50. Fans were outraged about this character's death, so much so that Marvel almost instantly wrote a storyline to revive the character, and she was back on the scene about a year later. Now I can hear you all, you're wondering, well, what is her story? Well, I'm going to tell you. Like I said before, this character's origin story has actually been changed, so we're going to be following the official origin in Spider-Woman Origins. Jessica Drew, born in London, England. And when her mother was carrying her in the womb, her mother was actually hit with a laser beam that contained the traits of several different species of spiders. Her parents would eventually disappear under mysterious circumstances, and she would be recruited into Hydra as an assassin and a fighter. Jessica would eventually learn the true nature of Hydra, and she would assault the base and run away, but Hydra have planted memories in her brain that aren't exactly true, and they make her think that she is an evolved spider that killed people before ever joining Hydra. Jessica would be distraught and disorientated, would run into the woods and would collapse, and she'll be recaptured by Hydra and brainwashed and hypnotized. Her first brainwashed mission is to go into London and capture Alicia Masters, but after an encounter with Grimm, her brainwashing is undone and she actually goes on to save Masters. Then Modred the Mystic comes along, removes Jessica's memory alterations and restores her to her original self, which is a very good thing. After this, Jessica moves to London and she really struggles to get a job. You see, she, like a spider, actually instills fear and dislike from other people. Then, following an aborted break-in, Jessica would be unmasked by Jerry Hunt, who was working for Scotland Yard at the time, and he would become obsessed with her. Soon after this, Jessica would encounter the sorcerer Magnus, and he would offer to help her, and then she would have to defend him from Excalibur, who was sent by Morgan Le Fay. And then she would move to Los Angeles, and Magnus would be all like, oh, by the way, your father was murdered, lol. And she would go out to find her father's murderer. After another encounter from Morgan Le Fay, who was looking for Darkhold, Jessica and Jerry Hunt would enter a relationship, and they would go on to find her father's killer, who would confess and then die straight away. So for a long time, Jessica kept her Spider-Woman identity a really big secret. And then after a battle with the brothers Grimm, she would break up with Jerry Hunt and he and Magnus would leave her. There's a bit of a blank period here in terms of what's shown in the published comics, but we kind of know what happens. Jessica goes public as Spider-Woman, becomes a bounty hunter, begins working with Scotty McDowell, who is a paraplegic criminologist. The team-up of Jessica and Scotty really didn't work out, so Jessica moves to San Francisco with her friend Lindsay and becomes a private investigator and actually enters a relationship with her landlord, And also, Lindsay would figure out that Jessica was Spider-Woman, but this just causes them to grow closer as friends. On her PI adventures, Jessica would encounter Morgan Le Fay again, but she would have to give up her immunity powers to save Giant Man. Also, her relationship with her landlord would grow and grow and grow, and she would reveal her Spider-Woman identity to him, and he broke up with her because he just wanted a normal woman. Time would move on, and Jessica would have to travel in astral form to 6th century England, where she would have to battle Morgan Le Fay to save all of her friends' souls which have been captured. Jessica would defeat Morgan, but her human body would die while she was battling Morgan, so she asks Magnus to put a spell over all of humanity so that they would forget her. The spell worked until Tigra and Shroud find Jessica's dead body, and they get in contact with the Avengers and Doctor Strange. They would all travel to the astral plane and have to battle Morgan Le Fay themselves, and they would then reunite Jessica with her body, but there was a cost. To make this work, Magnus had to die, and Jessica had to lose all of her powers. After this, she would continue being a private investigator, but stopped being Spider-Woman. Later on, Jessica and Lindsay get a job delivering the Black Blade over to Japan, but while passing through Madripoor, Jessica becomes enchanted by the blade. Quick side note, by this point she did have her wall-clinging abilities, super strength, and super agility back. Fortunately, Jessica would be saved by Lindsay and Wolverine, and after this, Jessica and Lindsay moved to Madripoor and set up a private investigator business there. Next, a woman named Charlotte Witter, who was also using the Spider-Woman name, would attack Jessica, steal all of her powers, and leave her near death. Jessica is put in New York City Hospital, but then Madame Web takes her out of there and points her in the direction of Mattie Franklin. Now, Mattie Franklin is another woman who used the Spider-Woman identity, and Franklin would actually go on to absorb all 4 Spider-Woman's powers from Charlotte into herself. After this, Jessica would actually stay with Madame Web, and over time her powers would return, but they would be erratic and unreliable. Jessica would go back to San Francisco, where she would find out that Mattie Franklin has gone missing. Her investigation would take her back to New York, and here she would find out that Mattie had been kidnapped by a drug dealer who was cannibalizing her to make a mutant growth hormone. This is where things get really, really good. A Hydra agent called Colony would contact Jessica and tell her that if she joins Hydra and joins S.H.I.E.L.D. as a double agent, that she can have her powers back. Now obviously Colony is an agent of Hydra, so if Jessica says no, he's just going to kill her. So Jessica contacts Nick Fury and he urges her to accept. It turns out that Hydra was actually just a team of Skrulls that wanted to kidnap Jessica, make their queen take her place so they could do a secret invasion. Multiple heroes from around the world would actually be replaced, and it will be Tony Stark that finds the orbiting Skrull ship that contains all of the replaced heroes, including Jessica. After the secret invasion, Jessica would be a part of the New Avengers, and she would actually be the one that tells the New Avengers, yeah, S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't a thing anymore. Along with Iron Fist, they all attack the Hydra base to try and find out if the Skrull Jarvis had been contacting Earth's villains to try and leave America or Earth. It's around this time that Jessica would actually team up with more heroes than ever before. She would team up with the New Avengers, she would team up with the Lady Liberators, she would team up with Doctor Strange when he has to find the next Sorcerer Supreme, and she would even go on to fight Madame Mask. Jessica would then become an agent of S.W.O.R.D, and I actually really didn't like this part of her life. It was just scroll this, scroll that, look it's Spider-Man, oh wait it's a Skrull, and it really wasn't that good. However, I do feel like this was important and needed to happen because after all of these Skrull adventures, Jessica would be offered more opportunities in S.W.O.R.D. Now we're at one of my favourite Marvel events, the Siege of Asgard. Here, Jessica would team up with Ms. Marvel, Mockingbird, and Jessica Jones, and they would all rescue Norman Osborn. After this, all the New Avengers go to a safe house in Brooklyn, where they meet up with Steve Rogers. Here, Jessica and Spider-Man would be teamed up, and they have to do a reconnaissance mission on Avengers Towers. Mandrill and Griffin turn up, and Mandrill takes control over Jessica. Fortunately, Spider-Man is able to get Jessica far enough away from Mandrill so that he loses control over her. Jessica and Spider-Man would trick Mandrill into thinking that Jessica had defeated Spider-Man, and Mandrill would give Jessica more commands, but then she would walk up to him, punch him square in the mouth, and inject him with spider venom. The duo would then go to defend the Asgardians, fight the Iron Patriot's forces, and bear witness to the Sentry's defeat. Jessica is then asked to join Steve Rogers' Avengers, but she goes up to Wolverine and is like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't think I earned it." And Wolverine's just like, "Well, do stuff to earn it then." Kang the Conqueror would then appear, warning everyone about the downfall of reality in the future. But then the Four Horsemen would turn up, which the Avengers defeat, and then Jessica goes to New York and defends its citizens from attacks coming from the time stream. After this, Jessica wouldn't really do much. She'd go on a mission for S.W.O.R.D. in which she would find a Space Knight suit, which turned out to hold the consciousness of Ultron, and she would be kidnapped. But other than that, she hasn't really been about. I'll tell you where I stand on Jessica, and you can be free to hold your own judgment. But really, I feel like no writer really knows what to do with Jessica. I mean, one minute she's just an all-out superheroine, next she's this really dark and mysterious character, next she's a dark and gritty character, and I feel like she just needs a break. What would probably be best for this character is if she got her own series again, with one consistent creative team, and that would set in stone the direction that writers have to take this character. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything about Jessica, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history. And also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.